Okay, we're going to talk about compression, HEVC, or H.265 compression. The new and improved. HEVC stands for High Efficiency Video Codec. It is a joint standard. Really, it's a successor to H.264. H.265 is the latest. 264 is what we've adopted over the last 10 years or so. The important concept of compression. It's all about bandwidth efficiency. Because you don't want to be storing 3 gig. You had a native 3 gig. You could, but you'd fill up a hard drive really quick. So we're constantly looking for ways for efficiency in storing and moving content. I was at a large conference at IBM back in 1998, I guess it was 99. It was the future of video and media. And there was discussion back then. Would bandwidth become so cheap that nobody cares about compression, everything's moving around the planet uncompressed? Or would compression become so wonderful and efficient that everything's compressed? Well, maybe it's both at the same time. Bandwidth is cheaper than ever. It's not free. You get a connection between here and Vancouver, you'll find out it's not free. You pay. You pay for quality, you pay for bandwidth. Storage. Everybody has a terabyte on their person at any given time. Is that free? No. You start filling up 3 gigabits per second, you run out of hard drive space constantly. It's not free. Can you fit uncompressed video in your typical cable infrastructure? No. Can you fit uncompressed video in a 6 megahertz channel for over-the-air broadcast? No. 38.8 megabits is all you can fit into a digital cable station, a channel. Well, we need compression. Efficiency is what it's all about. The gee-whiz factor of H.265 or HEVC is it's 10 times more complex algorithm than H.264, which H.264 was 10 times more complicated than MPEG-2. Well, it takes time and intelligence to get to that point that something that complex can be a business case. We're there. We've learned enough from MPEG-1 to MPEG-2 to H.264 to HEVC. 10 times more complex encoding algorithm, which means you have a more complex decoding algorithm. Well, we're there to the point that early adopters are moving in that way because the savings in bandwidth, you have a 50% bit rate reduction compared to H.264, 75% bit rate reduction compared to MPEG-2. Well, in the world of business, that can make or break a business case. If I can fit more content into the same pipe, I make more money. And I get more out of the pipe that I'm paying for now. Well, there's some applications. Japan is going full steam into it because that's what they usually do. It's all about deploying more channels over satellite, over cable, over IP, over the air. It's all about content, people willing to pay for it. We need lower cost of video storage and distribution because when I was doing VOD projects in 1994 and 95, IBM quickly learned VOD was a $0 billion business. There was no money to be made in the business case because the set-top boxes that was involved with were $10,000 per subscriber in 1994. Is that a business case? No, that's a science fair project. Because there's no way you're going to get $10,000 in 1995 money out of a subscriber, by ordering movies maybe once a week. Well, we've come a long way since 1994, and that's where we're continuing to go. It's all about reaching more people. Mobile, IPTV, getting it out there to anybody willing to pay for it. I own the content. Somebody owns the content, get it to whoever wants to pay for it. Quality of experience for over the top, which is TV anywhere type of approach. It's all about the quality of experience. As I said, you don't care if it's 2 tin cans with a piece of string in between. If I can get video through it and it's not an annoying experience, I don't care. I'll pay for it, I'll enjoy it, I'll have a business case. Quality of experience is really what it's all about. Quite a bit today we were talking about quality of service. That is the underlying quality of the connection between point A and point B. The end user doesn't care about your iPad, or the end user doesn't care about any of that stuff. What they care about, black frames, freeze frames, blockiness, loudness issues, something that makes that content unpleasant to pay for, unpleasant to view. Well, we're moving to the world of HEVC and dash protocols. We'll talk about those as the day goes on. It's all about same quality at less of a bandwidth consumption. Half the bit rate, same quality. That's a good thing. You see that for your reference there. How compression basics. The encoder is the brains of the operation. That's where the intelligence is. It's an asymmetrical system. The encoder has all the rocket science and technology. Decoders are meant to be cheap. The cheaper, the better. $10,000 for the Bell Atlantic VOD trial was not a business case. Now we have consumer electronics pricing with set-tops with hard drives. Back then, hard drives were out of the question. How much RAM do you really need in that decoder? Because that could make or break the case. Remember the days back in the 90s and whatnot? How much RAM do you really need to get your job done? Well, I could use 2 more. Well, we can't afford 2 more right now. You got to be kidding. Now, who worries about that anymore? Things get cheaper. Hard drives get cheaper. RAM gets cheaper. Processing gets more robust. So we're doing intra, which is spatial, and inter, which is temporal over time coding, which is really what it's all about. Because what you're looking for in compression, what is the same and what is different? Within spatial, what is the same? This whole area of the sky is the same shade of blue. Well, you can get carried away so the sky starts looking like it's patched together like a quilt. Well, that's not normal. You went too far. Or you can say over time. What is the same and what is different over time? I'm standing here, the background hopefully isn't changing much. If I move, I'm what changed, everything else didn't change. So what didn't change, resend, resend, resend. What changed is me, I'm here, then I go over here, resend it, but move it to a different place. X, Y coordinates, motion vectoring. You want to reuse as much as possible. Same place, or in a different place. That's a key discrete cosine transform encoding. It's all about better picture quality. Everybody wants the highest quality at the lowest bit rate. That hasn't changed in my 20 years of being involved with digital video. It's still the same. You can figure out a way to do it, you're the hero. Scope of the standard. People say, well, aren't they standardizing the encoder? No, they're not. Never really have. Why? Because it allows you to be creative. What is standard is the decoding, the stream going to the decoder. Because decoders are meant to be cheap, so they need to be repeatable in mass quantities. So it's a standard decoder, which means you must be sending a signal it understands. That's standardized. How you get to that point, whatever you want to do. Your creativity and your genius is your intellectual property to make a bundle of money. If you can figure out different algorithms, processing, how to do it with cheaper hardware, faster, that's your business case. The rocket science in the encoder is proprietary, whatever. I've been asked this question for 20 years. How do I set up my encoder? My answer is still the same, I don't know. What does the encoder manufacturer recommend? You're trying to do hockey, what do they recommend? You're doing golf, what do they recommend? You're doing swimming, what do they recommend? And then test it to see if you're getting the highest quality, the lowest bit rate. We'll talk about objective testing and single-ended in a little while here. What we're trying to do is to have cheap decoders, so that must be standardized. Okay, now we're getting into what's different with HEVC. You have a coding tree unit. This is pretty much the high level. A tree is a branching structure. How do things interact? The tree branches out like you do in file structure. It's the same thing with compression. So your coding tree unit is essentially like a macro block. You know, look at it that way, but here in the world of HEVC, it can be 64 by 64 pixels, 32 by 32, 16 by 16. The more detail there is in a certain part of the picture, the smaller you want to make the blocks. The sky, go to 64 by 64. If it's a painted wall, 64 by 64. If it's me holding up something like this and wiggling it around, you want to have smaller blocks because that's where the information really needs to be specific, because the human eye can see, I can't see it, I can see it, and you take it from there. So you have different size of blocks. You have a coding tree block. There's units and there's blocks. The blocks are divided into luma coding blocks, chroma coding blocks. There's one luma block and there's two chroma blocks, at least the method that I'm learning here. So there's a total of 3. This is where you locate the buffering. So the coding tree comes down to the coding blocks. That's actually where things are being buffered and processed and all that stuff. You have variable size. You can have larger coding tree blocks because what you're doing, you're putting the processing power where it's needed. If nothing's going on over here in the edges, don't worry about it. Where the action is, where the money's being made, is where the processing is going. So that's where the huge leap from MPEG-2 to where we are today. Because MPEG-2 treats the picture as all picture elements are pretty much equal. HEVC says, where is the human eye drawn? That's detail motion, usually towards the center of the screen. So we have our coding blocks. So I said there's one for luma, 2 for chroma, and this is where you go down the coding blocks. That's where your prediction types are done. Intra and inter. Intra is within a picture, inter is time. That's a time element being thrown in here. Discrete cosine transform done at variable sizes depending on the frequency content of the coding block. Once again, where the action is where I put the processing. DCT is discrete cosine transform. Forgot to mention that. Discrete cosine transform is taking the spatial world, the horizontal and vertical world, from horizontal and vertical to frequency. How much change is there vertically? No change is a DC level. A lot of change is frequency. Horizontal, no change. DC level, no change, no frequency. Lots of change, like a herringbone or checkerboard or something like that, something of a picket fence, a lot of frequency detail. That's how it's done. Discrete cosine transform encoding, I can look at it and tell you it is or maybe it isn't. I know when I see discrete cosine transform the same way you do. It looks blocky. It's being processed in blocks. MPEG-2, H.264, and we're moving here. HEVC is block oriented. If the blocks are being processed correctly, the picture looks wonderful. If they're not being processed correctly, the picture looks blocky, mosaic, tile, whatever you want to call it. The problem is discrete cosine transform. Blockiness does not exist in your everyday life. When you wake up in the morning and you see the world blocky, you're on your way to the hospital if you're lucky. Something's seriously wrong. So when we're watching TV, we see blockiness. That is something we don't deal with anywhere except watching TV, which I don't get into. JPEG 2000 is not discrete cosine transform. It's using high and low frequency band passing. So when JPEG 2000 wavelet compression falls apart, it looks blurry. Blurry is everyday life. I take off my glasses, you're blurry. If you're blocky, that's a whole different problem. So DCT looks blocky. So we're still in the discrete cosine transform mode. What was added in H.264, which I didn't put in the slides and I'm still making this as we go. H.264 realizes the human sensitivity to blockiness. So it has a deblocking filter. If it senses blockiness in the picture, it kind of smears the edges of the blocks because we accept blurry more than blocky. The blocks are there, but they're kind of hidden and smudged over. The picture gets soft, but it's better than blocky. Okay, so we're looking at the coding tree. We're trying to show that represented and how that fits into the block structure. We have a big block, and we break it into smaller blocks. If I had a picture under that, you would see frequency content in various parts of that block that the encoder is trying to make sense out of as efficiently as possible. Once again, putting the processing power on edge. Edge is where we see fidelity or lack of fidelity. Do we see high frequency content? Fine print, the grass blade, somebody's hair. That's how we determine quality, so the encoder puts the processing power of where the human eye determines quality. Kind of getting repetitious here. We have coding blocks. Prediction. Karl is standing here waving around. Karl moves over here. Prediction algorithm says Karl's going to be over here and over here. So what it's doing, it's not predicting the future because latency is involved with compression. It's looking backwards in time to say, how do I move Karl over here? We're using as much of these blocks as I can in different positions, forward and backward in time. So there's prediction, there's bidirectional prediction going on. What we're attempting to show here with HEVC, there's more motion prediction vectoring. It's finer degrees where H.264 is the one on the left, HEVC is the one on the right. So there's more directions where pixels can go. Because what you're doing in compression, you're trying to reuse as much as you can. So the larger area you can look at for motion changes, the better the encoding algorithm. Karl's here, we move him over here, and we move all the blocks that we can over to here. Once again, that's based on the human vision model, which means the faster I move, the less accurate the blocks have to be, because you can't tell the difference. If I'm moving quickly, you can't see edges, you can't see anything. Your brain just blurs the image. I stop, everything locks up, you can see I'm wearing a microphone again or something. So, fascinating stuff. Random access point, your RAP. What this is, what you have is an instantaneous decoder refresh. Because what we're working up to with HEVC is the world of jumping around. I can be watching video and say I want to click on something and it takes me somewhere else. I'm watching an advertisement. Yes, I love that Ford Mustang convertible. Tell me more about that. And you can jump in and out like you're surfing television is where we're going with this. You're just constantly jumping in and out of stuff, which means the video stream needs to keep up with you. And once again, for quality of experience, it needs to just work. It can't freeze an hourglass and be blocky and black frames. No tolerance for that. So the point of this is you have instantaneous IDR, instantaneous decoder refresh. So decoder doesn't have, you have a long gap, but there's ways it can get in and out of that. Because what we didn't get into here too much is iframes. An iframe is a real picture of Karl standing here. 2 seconds later, I'm standing over there is a real picture. Everything in between is predicted or bidirectional based on those two pictures. By doing it this way, once you're in a GOP, you have random access points, which I'm still trying to understand this in my own mind, how it can derive a picture within a GOP structure so you can have instantaneous jumping in and out of streams. Where with MPEG, you can't. Traditionally, with long GOP, you have to wait 2 seconds to do anything. You're kind of locked. You have an iframe here and a real picture of me over here. I can come into here, I can go out over here. I can't do it in between or else the picture just falls apart because there's not enough reference points. So that's a concept I'm going to do a lot more studying on. As far as parallel processing, which is what we've gotten into in the world of everyday life computer processing, do everything simultaneously. Get out of the serial processing so that everything is, multi-core, multi-threaded. Well, we're doing the same thing in the world of encoding and decoding. So we have independently decodable packets. So it can be doing things simultaneously. Because with MPEG, there's like a zigzag function it would go through back in the early days, which meant it basically was scanning through a picture and then it did the same thing on the decode. Here, the picture's basically happening in multiple places at exactly the same time. So hopefully that reduces latency, you have more error resistance, It's just you can do things faster. You're not doing things in a serial fashion. Parallel processing of tiles, the same thing. You're doing multiple parts of the picture at the same time. Independently decodable rectangular partitions. So you're not doing a serial decode. Like you're not scanning the picture, rebuilding it. You're kind of building it on a broader base. Wavefront parallel processing. So this is because we have pixels, we have blocks, we have macro blocks, slices, and pictures. So what this is doing at a slice level, which is a region of a picture, it has like a wave. It's painting across the picture. So there's some fascinating stuff that's happening simultaneously. I'm still doing more reading on that one. Okay, so profiles and levels. In my own little brain, P is profile, P is the processing algorithm, the toolbox. What exists as far as how I do things. Level, I always look at what's the level, how many lines, what's the picture size, the bit rate. It's more picture oriented. Profile is processing, level is the actual picture size, all that good stuff. So there's different tiers. You say HEVC, high profile, high tier, unknown level. Well, that's what that analysis that we ran came up with on a file that we got a hold of. For your reference, HEVC versus other codecs, well, it's all about MPEG-2 to H.264 to H.265 HEVC. As you can see, what we've gotten there, we still have I, B, and P. iframe is a standalone picture. P is predicted where Karl's going to be. Bidirectional is looking forward and backward in time. It's actually backward in time, just different degrees, so there's no prediction into the future. It doesn't exist. So what it's looking for between iframes, I'm predicting motion, but I'm calibrating all my calculations to get the highest quality at the lowest bit rate. And what's being done with the DCT transform, you see there's different sizes from 32 down to 4x4. We're back in the good old MPEG days. It was 8x8 you were locked into. Because once again, you're putting the processing power where it's needed. CABAC. It was one of the ways H.264 was done, but CABAC is the only way it's done in H.265. And what this is doing is looking for efficiency. If you have a picture that has a repetition of certain values, instead of sending all those values independently, you say, here's a value that equals a picture element, but send it multiple times, as repeated in the decoder multiple times. Instead of sending it multiple times, you say, I'm sending it once, decoder, when you get this, reuse this 5 times, 10 times, 100 times, whatever it takes. So you're getting efficiency that way. Instead of sending the information, tell the decoder, reuse, 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 put the picture back together. Okay, I have an HEVC Analyzer. That's something I'm learning too. Just got the beta code for this, and what it's doing, looking at all the things we're talking about. So an encoder engineer, a developer, can use this tool to say, do we know what we're doing? This is the kind of tools that people that do encoder design live and die by. They need to see what the weakness is of their algorithm. If there's no motion, do they have motion vectoring? That happens. You have a noisy algorithm, you have motion vectors all over the place, and nothing's happening. What happens if you put in film grain? Does that bring it to its knees, or you pre-filter the film grain out because film grain looks like random noise? All this you're looking at to see is the processing power I'm allocating, because you're trying to get the highest quality, the lowest bit rate, which means the processing power you have, you better be using it in the picture where the human eye gets the most benefit out of it. That's what this tool does. Thank you. Okay, who's next? I'm not skipping anybody here. Codec optimization. This is a fun section. Some more pain and suffering I can share with you. Things I learned the hard way, which I said when I got to be an old man I would actually do. So I'm trying to keep my word. Codec optimization. Everybody wants it, but how do you get there? You call the encoder manufacturer and say, I'm doing hockey. What do you recommend? Okay. Well, I was in the lab at IBM for a while. I made a living evaluating different encoders and decoders over various network constraints. They would say, we're doing a deployment in China. Here's the network you have to live by, Karl. Here's a truckload of encoders and decoders. You tell me which is the best one for this deployment. All right. Call the encoder manufacturer. We're looking at backhauling basketball into China. What do you recommend? Well, I do this, this, and this. Then test it and see if it makes sense. But you need some way of making it objective. Why picture quality analysis? Here's what I learned the hard way. When I look at video and I'm saying this encoder configuration with this network, with this decoder, gives me the best quality. According to who? According to my eyeballs. If the eyeballs of my customer agrees, my subjective evaluation is great. Good job, Karl. I like that. If they look at it and say, I don't like that. I don't agree with what you're showing me. My subjective evaluation has limited value in satisfying the customer. So I said I learned the hard way. I would say, other people in the lab, hey, come take a look at this. Which do you like better, this configuration or that configuration? Yeah, I think I like that one. Okay, what do you think? I think I like that one. Great, consensus is we like this configuration. Show it to the customer. Hopefully they agree. If they don't, you're right back where it was when it was only my opinion on the table. So then IBM back in the 90s had people looking for things to do, somebody to charge. We're going to bring in human factors engineers. We're going to bring in people from corporate, you know, the smart people. I was in an R&D lab. I guess we weren't smart enough, but we didn't have human factors engineers. These are people who know how to run tests with human beings, which I'm not an expert in. So what we did, we rented a room like this. We put different displays around, call a temp agency and say, I need people to fill this room that have 20/20 corrected vision, 2 eyes, and they're not colorblind. Okay? And you'd be amazed who walks in the door then. You're dealing with the unemployed public. But you want non-expert viewers to come in and evaluate. So it's a big deal like this. There's sandwiches, there's soft drinks, there's security issues, there's, you know, you people are professionals, you're dealing with unemployed people that have nothing better to do, which means it gets complicated. Okay, so we start running tests. Everybody's taking their little score sheet. I don't see any problem. It looks awful. I hate it. You know, they're basically keeping a score, 0 to 5. And non-expert viewers is what you're trying to get. The problem is lunchtime. What do people do at lunchtime? They talk. These are all strangers. They start talking. What are we here for? Why are we getting paid to watch all these goofy video clips? Oh, it's that mosaic, tiling, blocky stuff. Oh, yeah. Now I know what this is all about. They can't fool me anymore. So you start having expert viewers after lunch, which throws askew to all your results. I want non-expert viewers. I had those until lunchtime. Now I have people say, oh yeah, I know what this is, you know. They're looking for every block, and can't fool me. So your results are now totally different as the day goes on. People leave and get lost in the building. That's a whole nother story. Seriously, it's amazing. You wonder why some people are unemployed. But anyway, I hate to say it, but okay, so you get the results back. Everybody goes home. You clean up the mess everybody made. And my phone starts ringing. Karl, how do we do on your test? Well, you did okay with this test, not so good over here, a lot of blockiness on this one sequence. And they always say, we have a fix for that. I'll send you a patch. We can take care of that problem. Okay? If anybody understands testing methodology, as soon as I touch that encoder with new firmware, all my results are now totally invalid. Regression testing. It's like I never ran a test. So what do? Okay, I load the new stuff and I go through this again. What I learned, the first time was exciting. The second time you knew what to expect. By the third time you're tired of dealing with the public watching TV. It's no fun anymore. I realized I got a deadline with a deployment and here I am feeding the unemployed lunch. You're not getting anywhere. It's like, and the phone's gonna ring. Oh, I got a fix for that one. Everybody, as you all know, software is never finished. You run out of time. Okay, we have a version, cut off, that's it, no more changes, ship it. Okay, now what do? Fix the bugs we caused with the last release. It's never finished. So I was never finished. So the same thing, well, the advantage was it was no longer Karl Kuhn's opinion. The masses told us this is the best configuration. Until we changed the firmware, it's totally meaningless. So without getting over dramatic, the guy that I replaced at Tektronix was my application engineer at Tektronix. So I said, Rudy, what can you do for me? This is driving me nuts. Oh, you didn't hear about the PQA 200. We have this reference-based testing. I go, well, I got to look at this stuff. I brought it into the lab. I got every IBM facility around the world to get one of these. That way we're running different tests. I could say, are you seeing the same thing I'm seeing? Yes, I am. If I'm not seeing what you're seeing, why is there a difference? Why? It's the same content, same configuration, but you're getting a different score. It was not the PQA that was different. It was an objective, repeatable system. This is an algorithm that was based on 20 years of work with Sarnoff Labs and IBM with the best vision scientists they could find. You know, PhD level people. I don't even know what they're talking about. They know so much about vision scientists. But the point is, the PQA made it repeatable algorithm. What it does, I have a reference and a test. My laser pointer is here. This is my reference. This is the gold standard, right out of the camera, whatever. Before my device or network under test. This is what I receive on the other end, at the downlink site, on the other side of the decoder, the other side of the ocean, whatever it is. It's based on human vision modeling, so it knows what people see. We don't see as much as we think we see. Color, we barely see. We see edge detail and problems in black and white. Where the human eye is drawn is towards the middle of the screen, light compared to dark, human form, human face, foreground compared to background, motion moving towards the camera compared to away from the camera. So all these algorithms you can turn on, turn off, depends on what testing you want to do. So what was done, my reference is my gold standard, this is my test. I get a difference map based on the test configuration for the human vision model that I'm running on any given test. This is different. If this is totally black, human vision-wise, there's no difference in the content. If this is totally white, they're totally unrelated. They have nothing to do with each other. So what this is showing you, based on the human eye, the brighter the white, the more of a difference between this picture and that picture the human eye would catch. So it gives you a score. Reference, test, graphs. This is a graph. I run different tests. Down here is perfect, up here is worthless. So you can see frame by frame how your scoring changes. And you can step frame by frame through this. You can see what's happening here. You can see what's happening here. Get back to the encoder manufacturer and say, well, there's motion moving this direction, that direction, bright, dark, gold, whatever it is. And your score gets better or worse when that happens. And they say, yeah, we're having trouble with left to right motion. Right to left is okay. Left to right, we got some issues. We'll work on that. I mean, it's to that level of rocket science this stuff goes on.
Karl?
Yes. Yes.
You're telling us that this map that we see, the difference map,
Yes.
it's not really a mathematical map, but it's something that's filtered to what somebody judged the human vision was looking at.
It's actually both.
Okay.
The PhD level white papers that explain how we do that, I don't even pretend to understand more than 10%. It's how the human eye, the retina, the brain processes contrast and motion. So what it's doing, it's mimicking the human vision system mathematically, because that's how this is all going on, to show you what a human eye would see different based on white papers that thick of how we came up with this. Good question, but it's, I mean, IBM said, we got to get this stuff. I went in, justified it, and said, we can't just keep doing this stuff. We can't waste time feeding the unemployed. We have to get our job done. So what this allowed me to do without being over dramatic is I could go in on a Saturday morning, load the latest firmware, run tests, be out of there by lunchtime, have the report on my manager's desk on Monday saying, what do you want to do? Is this what we go forward with the customer, or do you want me to do something else? No sandwiches, no soft drinks, no bus loads of IBM people flying in from corporate. None of that. So PSNR, this has been around long time, way before Tektronix did anything with this. It is a signal-to-noise ratio between a test and a reference. No human vision modeling at all. It's Signal to noise, basically. That's all it is. Here's what I have. Here's how much it changed. There's a difference map. No human vision modeling, so I would say it has no value. It's quick, it's dirty. Some people live by it. I don't bother. It doesn't tell me what a human eye actually sees. Because the whole picture has changes. Am I looking up here? Am I looking down there? Am I looking at the tree? Probably not. So as I'm tweaking things, I'm changing the whole picture. I want to change where people are actually looking. This is what I was using back in the 90s at IBM. Picture quality measurements, just noticeable difference, JND. A just noticeable difference, statistically, you have a room full of human viewers. When does 75% of the people in the room say, I just noticed a difference? That's a just noticeable difference of 1. So with that said, a low number of just noticeable differences from perfect to impaired is good. Perfect to unusable is a high number. From my personal experience, if you have terrible quality video, you're tweaking around with a just noticeable difference change, I don't think has much of a value. If you're working with high quality video and you're fine-tuning an algorithm, just noticeable difference tells you something of value. But there's a better way. But back in the 90s, this was the leading edge rocket science. This is what's new and exciting. Differential mean opinion score. Differential mean opinion score is based on BT 500, which is the testing I was doing with the sandwiches and the soft drinks of the unemployed. But now it's in an algorithm, repeatable, in a box with none of that stuff involved. Low number is good, high number is bad. That still works. But the most important aspect of making this a more valuable test is the worst case training sequence. If I walk up to you and say, how are things going? From a 0, your life is unbelievably wonderful, and a 5 is, it's as bad as life can get. When do you use a 5? Well, my life is pretty miserable, but somebody else has it worse. It's the same thing with scoring video quality. When do I use the worst case? Because the next clip might be even worse. So it never gets used. So the value of just noticeable of training sequence is you can put a window. Here's as good as the video gets. Here's as bad as the video gets. Now you rate it in between. I've told you how bad it can get. So your accuracy has a more of a bell curve, what you would actually expect to see. Because people aren't saving the worst for the case that maybe never comes. So training sequence is very important. Attention modeling. This can be single-ended or double-ended. Attention map is where the human eye is actually drawn. Where do people really look? Once again, it's human form, human face, bright compared to dark, foreground compared to background, motion compared to still, middle of the picture compared to the extremes. With that said, you can run this as standalone, which shows me where people are looking. We've actually had advertisement companies or ad agencies buy it strictly for this algorithm to say, aha, your clients are looking where they're supposed to, according to this algorithm. They're looking at the cheeseburger, they're looking at the car, they're looking at the whatever. To prove it, say, okay, I like that, that sounds scientific. The way it is typically used as an overlay to the human vision model tests that you're doing. I want to run all these tests, plus I want to add the attention modeling to it, so I'm tweaking my algorithm for where the human eye is actually looking. So it improves your accuracy of what you're actually tweaking, which saves a lot of time. Difference map. So PSNR, it's kind of all over the place. It's just noise. Here we are with difference map based on human vision modeling. We see where actually the human eye is drawn. How does all this rocket science happen? As I said, there's white papers I can't even begin to explain, but I'll give this one a try. Format conversion. Are you upscaling or downscaling? You can do that. You can go in and customize this for whatever your picture size is. Display model. What display model are you using? Is it broadcast? Is it consumer? Or you can put in a custom display. I'm working with a company that is putting glass cockpits into a future fighter aircraft. They know exactly what display they're putting in. There's only going to be one. Where in the broadcast, you don't know, you're dealing with consumer grade, who knows what. So you can change, you can say broadcast, consumer, or you can put the characteristic curves from a manufacturer, specifically how that display, the gamma curves and all that cool stuff. View model, indoor, outdoor, how close to the screen, how far back. You can put that in, or you can say typical home environment, movie theater, because this could be digital cinema, who knows. Human vision perceptual model. Is it going into a nursing home, or is this the screen that's in the fighter plane with the pilot that has superhuman vision, or else they wouldn't be sitting in that seat to begin with? You can put in the vision curves, the sensitivity of the vision of the audience, or say general public, or you can make it tighter or looser than that. Attention model, a general attention model, or I want to see what people are paying attention to as far as motion or flesh tone or whatever you want to say. You want to make sure you tweak for the highest quality. Then you do all these cool measurements and you come up with a score. You can do specific artifact detection, lost edges, added edges. One of the tricks in the trade I learned in the early days of going around looking at venture capital companies that were hoping IBM would buy them. They would, back in the early days of encoding, old trick in the book is you make the picture soft, it's easier to encode. You get rid of the high frequency content. It's easier to encode, there's less high frequency. So what you do in your decoder is you add the edges back. So it's like taking away the treble, the high frequency in audio, and then when you play it back, crank it up. It's never as good as it should have been in the first place. It sounds distorted. So this is an old trick. On a small screen, congratulations, you fooled me. On a big screen, you see like halos and whatnot around people, artifacts. Not good. Before a transcode, we have a nice video. After a transcode, we have not so nice video. We get a score, and you can see it's off the chart at the top because it's awful video. You can see frame by frame what's happening. I don't like these slides. Quality of experience. Now we're moving more into the consumer real-time environment. That's what I'm trying to work a story into here. Quality of experience. That's what you and I do when we're sitting at home watching TV. We're having an experience. Hopefully it's a quality experience. Because I'm not worried about quality of service. I don't care sitting at home if Comcast has PCR jitter on their transport stream. If I can't see it on the screen, I don't care. The average viewer does not know the difference. So what you're looking for, duration to black, stuck in frozen video, blocky video. This, the most casual observer will find annoying if there's problems with it. So we need to measure quality of experience throughout a network. Single-ended. The PQA that I was talking about, laboratory grade, out of service, it's not real time. It takes 10 minutes to process 1 minute of video because it's doing all the rocket science. This is real time, 24/7, happening right now. Because what it's doing, single-ended, it has no idea, there's no reference. It knows what a black frame is, how much black for how long, you trigger the alarm. How much motion or lack of motion do I have? If there's no motion for 10 seconds, is that a problem? 30 seconds, is that a problem? Blockiness, how much blockiness? Not all content is the same. What it's looking for is edge detail on macro block transitions. If there's high frequency content between blocks, you have blockiness. So it looks at blockiness. You can set all this. How bad does it get for how long? Only you know. If there's a lot of still frames, you want to make it longer. If there's constant action, if 10 seconds of still is a big deal, you want to trigger on that. Low motion. If there's motion on the screen, it's highlighted in green. If there's no green blocks when you're in the motion view, you have a freeze frame. So it senses motion or lack of motion. Blocky video. There's blocky video. And we talked about transition differences, worst case. Okay, let's go right to this. Blockiness. I have people swimming and splashing. They're competing. All the blockiness, you can see how the blockiness is pretty bad. I have a blockiness meter here. It's up in the fail area of red or tickling up against it. So that means that's blocky video. What this allows you to do, if you get complaints. At 4 p.m. yesterday, you had a lot of blockiness. You go to your error log for this device. This is recording all this stuff, logging it. If it goes above a threshold, it puts it into an error log. In multi-layer testing, if I have blockiness, what layer is causing the blockiness or what layer is not causing the blockiness? If you have blockiness, you can go back to your multi-layer testing and say, well, at 4 p.m., was my IP layer smooth? Was my RF layer having hits? Or is it an encoder that's configured incorrectly, so swimming is going to look blocky because you're trying to make high-def swimming look good at 2 megabits per second. The encoder can't do it. Talking head, it was fine. Swimming, it falls apart. So it allows you to look at an error log and say, at the moment of blockiness, what problems was I having at what part of my network? What's causing it? What's not causing it? There's an error log. You can scroll through these forever if you want. There's a quality of experience log. You look at the log. You can see time correlated what's happening. You can run up and down the tree to see what packet, what program, and what error code you find. You can do multiple sessions. The VQS 1000, the point to make, that's the software we're looking at. Some people say, oh, I have a sling box, I can do that. Let's say you're sending out a feed from here and somebody in Vancouver is saying, we're seeing blockiness, or subscribers are complaining about blockiness on your content. Okay. You fire up VQS, you look at the IP port at the destination. Your point of presence. Do I have blockiness at my demarcation point? Yes or no? If I have blockiness at the demarcation point with this tool, the blockiness is in my network. A sling box does a decode, a re-encode, then over IP it sends you the information back to sitting right here in this room as if I'm connecting to Vancouver. The advantage of VQS 1000, you have a multi-program transport stream, your high def, your standard def, maybe whatever else. In a stream, you say, I want to see the high definition sports event. It actually goes into the transport stream, makes a copy of that transport stream, that specific program, and sends it back without a decode or a re-encode. It's as if I'm sitting in Vancouver, but now it's sending it back over the network as a single program transport stream. I'm decoding it locally here as if I'm sitting in Vancouver. So the beauty of that is if I have blockiness in Vancouver, sitting right here, in my network, it's my problem. If I see no blockiness in Vancouver at my demarcation point, tell somebody in Vancouver, what are you doing to my content? Oh, we're regrooming it, we're muxing it, we're doing this and that. There's your problem. I don't own the problem. Who's doing the remuxing? Oh, it's a head end over here. Well, we got to talk to somebody there because I can't fix it. It's not in my network. The finger pointing.
Karl,
Yes?
could you use this technology to throttle an encoder? If you put the delay in your transmission, get the feedback from the analyzer and throttle an encoder? Could you do that?
Could you control the encoder with this?
Yeah,
Is there
with the
feedback?
from the, yeah.
No, but I'm sure somebody could write code that would do that. No, that's an interesting approach. No, not to my knowledge. As it comes out of the box, it does not do that. Okay, what are we doing next? Adaptive bitrate. ABR. It's in everybody's future, like it or not, unless you're retiring soon. Adaptive bitrate streaming. What is it? Well, as I said, it's the future. Why? Because it's all about delivering content anywhere, anytime. One example, my kids are watching a TV show at home, and they're so addicted to it, they have to keep watching it. We get into the minivan, they can watch it from the back seat. And then we're sitting there waiting our turn to do whatever, a sporting event, or we're waiting to see somebody at a doctor's office. The kids could actually continue watching it on the cell phone, seamlessly, from the house to the car to the cell phone. That's where this is going. So I painted that beautiful picture. So how do we get there? The problem is, you got to manage all this stuff. Delivering it to my cell phone. Is the bandwidth available constant? No, it's not. I want a quality, non-annoying experience. No freeze frames, no blockiness, no black frames. So adaptive bitrate streaming is all about the device, my cell phone, tells the network how the buffer is doing. If the buffer starts going up or down, it says give me more megabits, give me less megabits. So you're getting the highest quality at the available bit rate with a non-aggravating, annoying experience. How do you do that? Well, here's how we do it. Or here's how somebody does it. Consumers expect video anywhere, anytime. How do you accomplish this? Adaptive bitrate streaming. Bandwidth is an unknown factor. You need to adapt to the available bandwidth. That's really the challenge, because the bandwidth available at any given time, any given location, especially in a mobile application, is variable. A non-annoying experience. Quality of experience high, customer satisfaction high. HTTP. So what we're doing here, we're moving files. So what we're doing is we moved into the file-based world. We're going to do a whole section on file-based content, because back in the good old days of tape, life was easy. Well, now we're moving stuff through firewalls, and quite often firewalls are a problem. So HTTP goes nicely through port 80 because it doesn't see it as an intrusion. It sees it as you're looking at video. So it sees ABR traffic as simple web activity, which is an important concept. You have content coming in from the outside world. Firewalls typically don't like that. Firewalls want to see you make a request and something sent. A request and something sent. Information flooding in through a port is usually considered an attack. So port 80 is kind of the welcome front door into content being brought in. Okay, so what we're doing here is we're segmenting. How do you segment? Well, there lies the challenge. Because in the world of fragmented, scalable delivery, you have to be able to jump up and jump down to different bit rates. As the bandwidth to my cell phone changes, well, it needs to happen seamlessly, but it's going to change. So it's jumping to different bit rates of files within the same program. So it's dynamically, seamlessly is the goal, and it's segmented. Typically 10-second segments is what most people are doing. You know, Apple is obviously big into this because why wouldn't they be? Their HLS is most popular. Microsoft, they still exist. They're doing smooth streaming. Adobe has their Flash, least popular. But Dash, I've gotten excited about stuff like this before and always been disappointed, is going to be the unifying standard. Everyone's going to be going to Dash, and that way Apple and Microsoft, everybody just plays together. I remember getting excited about MXF. Anybody remember that? It was going to be the wrapper that everybody uses for moving content. Well, sounded good. I fell for it because what happens with stuff that's unifying, it usually ends up being everybody's following the standard, but nothing's interoperable. It's interpretation. Like MXF was supposed to be a wrapper for moving content, post-production, wherever you needed to go with it. Problem is, yes, they're all following the standard, but everybody's interpretation is different, so it's proprietary, universally accepted standard, which is of no value. So anyway, hopefully Dash doesn't turn into the same thing, but that's an editorial comment. Operators are adopting the segmented, fragmented, adaptive streaming technology because that's where we're going. Dash is a standard for adaptive streaming over HTTP, so it might be nice for replacing Microsoft proprietary technology, smooth streaming, Adobe. We'll see where that goes. Henry, is anyone using Dash to your knowledge in a deployment?
Not in deployment.
Okay, that's
But enough for all.
okay. The subject Henry's an expert. Unified standard, well, we know how well people get along, so we'll see how standards get along. Everybody has an agenda. That's usually the problem. I've been involved with standards bodies, and it's everybody has an agenda. Can't blame them. That's why they're there at the meeting. So what we're doing here, The whole advantage of Dash is supposed to be codec independent, so agnostic to the flavor of encoding you use. Wouldn't that be nice? So your digital rights management, well, we're using encryption, common encryption. That way, it's all about encryption because people don't want content getting out of their control. If you're paying for it, you deserve it. If you're not paying for it, here's what you're allowed to do with it. So it's very specific. Digital rights management is a whole segment in law we could get into. Trick modes. I want to be able to do fast forward and rewind. I want to hit pause. I want to own the content. If I want to go back and see something twice, I want it to be seamless, just happen without any strange things happening. Dynamic advertising. That's the business case. It can be specific to a region, a user. It's all about, because advertising dollars, fighting for eyeballs is what it's all about. Back in the good old days of being 5 or 6 TV stations in the metro area, those days are gone. Everybody's after advertising. So we have a nice matrix here of the Dash, the Apple, Microsoft, Adobe, as far as what they can do and can't do for your enjoyment. Hopefully you get these slides, and if you need this as a reference guide, you're all set. Nice block diagram. We have our typical ingest, which goes into an encoder. Back in the good old days, transcoding was a big deal. Now transcoding is business as usual. It just happens as a normal part of any digital file-based workflow, because whatever you're starting with, somebody's going to want something different. And you're dealing with deployments like this. You want content reusability, because content is king. How it gets there isn't that important. But I own the content. I want to get it to anyone willing to pay for it. So we have fragmenters, regardless of whose it is. That's the whole idea. You break it into anywhere from 2 to 10-second file fragments. That way, as the dynamics of the network change, the decoder can say, give me more or give me less. Client, people out there looking at their various screens, 3 screens, whatever we're going to, be 10 screens before you know it. Adaptive bitrate profiles. Profiling, in my mind, is always the processing toolbox. Level is the lines, the actual picture oriented. So you can see there's different screen sizes, bit rates. So deployments may use anywhere from 4 to 16 output profiles. And this is where my segment on file-based QC really comes into play. Back in the good old days, 30 minutes, 1 hour of content. I knew the format. I knew what player it went into. I could hold it in my hand. I could hand it to somebody else. I could put it in the library and find it. In a file-based world where I'm changing things into adaptive bitrate, different profiles and levels and different wrappers, different deployments for different customers, different deliverables, it becomes very abstract. So more devices, you can see the 3G phones, the Wi-Fi, the broadband, different profiles. The whole idea is flexibility. Whatever the connection will bear, need to be able to make sure that it makes it in one piece. Here's a block diagram of Sentry, Medius, adaptive bitrate versions of that. So what we're doing here, we're taking live content, and surprise, surprise, there's a transcode. We do fragmenting and digital rights management to an origin server. It goes out to your distributed network for your computer, smartphone, TV. You need to monitor this stuff. Tektronix bought a company called Mixed Signals about, was it 4 years ago, Henry? Is that what it is now? And as usual, when some big news breaks, you do a Google search. Mixed Signals. I think I've heard of them. What do they do? And I was very disappointed. All they do is reporting and monitoring. Tektronix is as a monitoring and analysis company. What are they doing here? How can this happen? Well, I'll never be an executive. I've proved that because they do outstanding monitoring and reporting on small networks, huge networks. So it's very scalable. What your probes, is it out adaptive bit rate? Is it before the fragmentation? It can look at your various networks. Because what the tool does, mainly what I've talked about here today, is quality of service and quality of experience, but it's more the monitoring and analysis. But what I've learned by working with Henry and the rest of the gang is in a large deployment, executive management doesn't want to hear about PCR jitter and eye patterns and table structures. They want to know what is impacting their business, as I talked about before, the spreadsheet, the return on investment. So what these products do, what I've learned and still learning, in executive management land, you have a big deployment. Where are my problems? What are my top 10 problems I have in my network? The Monday morning meeting, I want to know the top 10 problems. And being a project manager, here's the top 10 problems. Who owns it? When is your due date? I say, it's yours for this problem, it's yours for that problem. Next Monday, I want to know how you solved it. So that's how you run big networks. So by having a tool that has visibility over the entire network for trends is how you actually start figuring out where I need to drill down. If you're running 50, 100 channels, whatever, you need some way to see, is it an East Coast problem, a West Coast problem, a Northern problem, a Southern problem? Is it program-oriented, program-specific? Is it loudness on a broad base? Is it local ad insertions being missed? You need visibility at a very high level over the kingdom to decide what you really need to drill down. Interesting stuff. Adaptive bitrate streaming. Thank you very much. We got one more section here. Calm. Not calm, we're talking about loudness. And CRTC compliance. Anytime you need to take a break, feel free, but I'm going to keep plowing forward here because the day is growing long. And we've got two more sections. Try to be out of here between 4 and 4:30. CRTC compliance. This is big news in Canada. Similar things we're doing in the US. And there's a lot of interpretation issues. What I want to make crystal clear, I am not an attorney, nor do I play one on television. I am not an attorney. So what I am sharing with you is my understanding of what this all means. I present this seminar around North America, and people say, I don't agree with that. I presented last week in Washington, D.C., and there was a lady there from the FCC saying, I think you might want to change what you're telling everybody because that's not what's happening right now. This is a moving target with a lot of different interpretations going on. So I recommend listen to what I'm saying, believe half of it, but deal with your own internal legal people to decide what you're going to do about it. And what happens if you're in violation? Because violation means you're in trouble. So I want to make sure I preface that up front that I am not an attorney. I'm sharing with you as I understand it today. And Henry can chime in because he's very involved with this locally. The overview. 1770. What this is an algorithm that attempts to mimic how people sense sound. When you look at a meter, an LKFS meter, that's showing you loudness K-weighted, full scale of how a person senses sound. When you look at dBFS, when you're looking at a surround sound mix, a stereo mix, you're looking at an electrical representation of a level. That's not what your brain senses. So what is being done with 1770, which is an interesting spec, you might want to download it and read it, it takes into account the human skull and how we process sound. Our survival on this planet is based around the human voice frequencies, communicating. That's how we got to where we are today, by sharing from generation to generation what we know. You know, hey, watch out for that woolly mammoth coming up. Oh, okay, fine, thank you, I didn't see it. That's how we survive. So the human voice is where the brain is the most sensitive. Off to the side, we really don't hear as much as we think we do because our survival is not that critical. So with that said, 1770 takes into the characteristic curves the resonant frequencies of the skull and how our brain processes sound. So that is loudness. Loudness is subjective. What's too loud to you might not be loud enough for me. But still you need something scientific and repeatable based on how human beings process sound. 1770, LKFS. L is for loudness. K is a K-weighted filter. Why K? Because A was the first filter that the Bell Telephone developed back when they invented telephones. The human voice, the load coils, trying to make the human voice frequencies have the most efficiency through a network. The A-weighted filter, human voice. K, 100 years later, all the way up to the letter K. This is the algorithm I've just described as far as human sensitivity to sound. There's Charlie Brown. He has a round head, but that's really the modeling for the loudness models for the human skull is considering a spherical head because that's the most common way to go, is everybody has a different shaped head. But the K-weighted filter relative to full scale. So what we're doing is we're measuring with 1770. The decibels are the same size. So you go from dBFS to LKFS. A dB is a dB. But it's the filtering that makes the difference for the human sensitivity. Anchor element, dialogue level, and target levels. Some terminology that need to understand. The anchor element is what a reasonable viewer would focus on when setting the volume control. I'm sure all your viewers are reasonable people. They're not. We've had people in the U.S. calling the White House to talk to the president about ads being too loud. Is that reasonable? No, that's a nut. But I mean, this is kind of stuff that happens. So in anything in government, when enough people start complaining, the government says we have to change this. What I've experienced in the U.S., the most complaints to politicians was people calling at night, say there's installing vinyl siding in your neighborhood, can we give you an estimate? Goodbye, hang up. The number 2 complaints to politicians is loudness. So we're trying to control this. Europe has the issues, North America, everybody has loudness issues. The problem is, by going from analog to digital sound, our dynamic range is now equal to digital cinema. You have 90 dBs of dynamic range that you can use for digital television. Do you want 90 dBs of dynamic range in your house? No, you don't. It's annoying. In a movie theater, I'm there to be blasted out of my seat. At home, that's not what people want to be experiencing. So what a reasonable person would set their level to for enjoying the program. Dialogue level in LKFS units of the anchor element. We need to have a unit of measure, and it's LKFS. Target loudness is what you're trying to achieve with the anchor element. So that way you have to have a common number. Negative 24 LKFS is the one that seems to be the most prevalent, which means I'm giving you content that is LKFS, neg 24 for the anchor element. Okay, so that should be consistent through all the content you're accepting and all the content that you're distributing. Long form content. This is long, more than 3 minutes. How long is a rope? How long is a program? 2 or 3 minutes. Because your short form is interstitial, bumpers, whatever, promos, shorter than that. So still what you're trying to do is to see how your audio level changes based on LKFS compared to dial norm. Dial norm, if that was used correctly, we wouldn't need any of this stuff with LKFS. Because dial norm is the amount of padding added in a decoder being triggered by the encoder to normalize the audio level to negative 31. How much padding do you put in? Attenuation do you need to do to get level negative 31? Negative 31 you normalize to, that way the consumer can make it whatever they want. But dialogue normalization was intended originally to say, I'm normalizing all my level based on dialogue. It has its own Dolby filters because Dolby owns the world with audio distribution. Based on human voice frequencies, dialogue normalization to negative 31, then the consumer does whatever. So you're presetting the volume control in the consumer's set top. If that was done and everybody played by the rules, I don't think we'd be having discussions about loudness. I've been to ad agencies, they would say, nod, nod, wink, wink. You work with us, your ad will be the loudest one in that cable system. Great, perfect. We'll do business more often. There's no one bragging about that anymore. That's like saying, we're going to cause you violations. Well, that's hopefully history to be forgotten. So what you're looking for is a difference between dialogue normalization and your actual LKFS level. The spec says they should track, but it's not required. I wish they would have said it's required. That if you have a dialogue normalization of negative 24 LKFS coming in, a dialogue normalization of neg 24, your LKFS should be negative 24, everything's the same. They're not. So that's where some variation comes in. If you're expecting, you're normalizing to a certain level based on the metadata, but the level is above or below that, it's going to appear too loud or too soft. So what we're trying to show here on this chart, the amount of padding gain adjustment to get the neg 31, there's 0 dB because do not apply any attenuation. Up here, neg 24, need to put in 7 dBs of attenuation and normalize down to here, and the consumer does whatever they want. But you need a common reference point to start with, and the consumer can make it their own. Okay, so what we're seeing here, different content has different dialogue normalization. You know, rock and roll music, got to have it punchy and right up against the top. So that's what radio stations are doing now for hit radio. Everything is compressed and dynamic range is all the way up because that's the sound they want, the high energy, ear-piercing sounds. So dramatic movie, you know, it's a little bit less movie, action movie. Trying to show you there's differences. What you're trying to do is normalize this throughout your transmission chain so you have consistency between channels and content. Measuring audio. 1770, as we talked about, that's an algorithm for how the human brain perceives loudness. And what is done here, you have your K-weighted filter, which is a resonant frequency of the head. How many channels? 1 to n. The beauty of this is you have your summation. So whatever quantity of channels you're bringing in, 5.1, 7.1, yeah, it would do that. It takes it into account so you have one number. Because what you're trying to do with 1770, this summation algorithm, is to come up with one measured number. Because one measured number is what I need to deal with. I have multi-channel audio coming in, but based on the human sensitivity, how loud is it? How loud is it perceived to be? Interesting thing here, there's a direction weighting. There's a 1.5 dB uplift to the surround channels. The speaker's behind you, another survival mechanism. Your ancestors had the right response. If I'd walk up to you in front of you and pop a paper bag, you'd say you ruined a perfectly good paper bag. If I sneak up behind you and pop a paper bag, I get a totally different response. It's a shock factor because our survival. If you see it happening, you can deal with it. A loud noise behind you is probably not a good thing from the old days. You know, fight or flight. So you react. So there's 1.5 more impact given to sounds coming from behind you in this weighting algorithm. The sounds behind you are more startling, so the loudness is perceived to be greater. There's the filtering. Got a curve here for the RLB filter, which is the whole filter that we're applying on top of the acoustics of the head. So these two filters work together to give how the human brain senses sound. Long form content, really the punchline here is you're not focusing on shouting or whispering. It's what a normal person would adjust the volume control to enjoy the content. So you want to see what it is at periods of time, and this is what this graph is showing you because you want nice flat lines. Variation causes problems because what happens, you can be running too low for a certain part of your programming. Everybody cranks up the volume. The volume comes in back up to negative 24 LKFS, and everybody's blasted out of their seats. There's no violation there, but it's an annoying experience. So what you need to do is log this stuff for history. You have people complaining, and you look at all your stuff and say, well, we're not running hot. But if a program before was running low, then you get the complaints because it comes back up to where it should be normalized to. So you need visibility, trending to see what's going on. And once again, LKFS is what you're trying to do as loudness, K-weighted filter, full scale. What's full scale? In digital audio, 0 is maximum. Everything is a negative number from there. So what you want to have is negative 24. You're 24 down from 0. 0 is maximum. In digital, you can't go above a maximum. In analog, you can keep going up until something goes up in smoke. Okay, short form content. Your anchor element is rarely or maybe not be isolated. So it might be somebody strumming a guitar, or it might be waves crashing or something like that. So you have to use some creative talents to figure out what's going on. So you want to look at that, but still your level here is what counts. So when you're creating this content, we'll talk about tools for that. This is more the monitoring once it's finished, but somebody's got to create all this content. Short form content, the value of the loudness measurement in units LKFS should match the dial norm value of AC3. Should. It's not shall or must. I wish they would have taken it up 1 degree and say it should match and that's it. I mean, you've got to do it. I mean, you shall or must. Should is a suggestion. Once again, I'm not an attorney. File-based content. Well, you got to look at it too to see what your loudness is, your dial norm value. They should track the same, but once again, it should, doesn't have to. Point is, the people sitting at home don't care if it came off of tape, off of a server, out of the studio, or from a satellite downlink from halfway around the world. They don't care. You're trying to provide an enjoyable quality of experience. And you're going through an AC3 encoder because for distribution, that's pretty much everybody does. Affiliate dial norm setting as you're going out through your network. What you need is an understanding between all the people who are supplying you content. So for distribution, they can handle it. If everybody's all over the map is where things start falling apart. And if you're supplying somebody content, is it consistent? So they know, well, you always run right on, you're always running a little bit hot or a little bit too low. So if they go in to compensate for it, if your content's all over the place, they're not going to be as accurate in what to expect. So you're adjusting your dialogue and your AC3 encoder. Local insertion of commercials, well, this is big business, we know that. So you want to make sure your dialogue should match your dial norms, your AC3 encoder, and your LKFS should match, but it's not required. Perceived commercial loudness. What we're doing here is we're showing one of the graphs. So you can see the deviation from your graph there as far as your dialogue normalization, your LKFS. They should be tracking the same. If they're not, it's going to be normalizing for neg 31, but the level coming in is not the same as dialogue normalization, so your levels will fluctuate. We're trying to show here the actual commercial was loud, but it may appear quiet due to the actual content being so far below dial norm. Well, there you go. There's variability. So you're trying to have consistency. Really, if you start getting all your content delivered to you and all the content delivered out to your subscribers consistently, the problem, it goes away. That's really what we're trying to achieve here with this. So if the program has a different dial norm setting, you can see how things can jump around there. It's tracking or it's not tracking, but the deviation is the same. It should be a fairly non-annoying experience. Spot check report. We're talking about spot checking because in the world of multi-channel, multi-program delivery, 24/7 monitoring of everything coming and going is probably not something you want to do. So the direction we're going here is spot checking, a spot checking report. You pick a random 24-hour period and you see what's going on. And you try to have all your content providers represented in that 24-hour period. Here's a way to document that. 24-hour analysis to see what's happening. You have a problem child, you want to be able to address that because what you're trying to do is not get complaints from your subscribers, not get complaints from any government official saying you're not following what you should be doing here. Checking compliance. Somebody's got to create this content. We've talked about pretty much the distribution side, the local insertion, the delivery to the home, differences between channels. What we're doing here is showing what you need to be looking at. Let's go back to that. And you see left, center, right, left surround, right surround. LFE is white, LTRT is white. If it's green, it's part of the A85 preset, for example, the loudness monitoring preset for North America, as it is at the moment, subject to change. So what it means if it's green, it's part of the summation. Europe is saying low frequency effects have got to be part of loudness. North America says, well, maybe not. So there's some discussion going on. I think it should be included. If you don't include low frequency effect, that means you can play around with and blast people out of their homes with low frequency sound. I don't think that's the intent here. I think it should be monitored. So with that said, there's a short, infinite, true peak, dial norm, and runtime observation. If you're creating content, you're delivering content, and the requirement is negative 24 LKFS with a dialog normalization of the same, you need to be able to monitor it as you're creating it. So what is being shown here is a surround sound representation of Dolby AC3. And let's go back. This is you sitting in the middle of the room. Left, center, right, right surround, left surround. The bigger this blue area, the more surrounded you are by surround sound. So artistically, you can visualize how you're mixing the sound by the channel and by playing around with phase. But what you're really trying to make sure of ultimately is my LKFS, based on the human sensitivity of sound. LKFS, loudness K weighted filter, full scale, 0 is maximum. Neg 24 is what we're trying to achieve. You're allowed 2 dB wiggle room. So that's good to see what's happening. But getting some audio mixing, which is a part of the seminar, it's kind of drifted away. How do I create different audio effects? I need to see phase. Let's stick with the easy one, a bird chirping. Let's say there's a speaker right there and a speaker right there. A speaker here, speaker there. We actually have speakers in the room, forgot about. You have a bird chirping. Because high frequency is easy for the brain to localize. Some of the tricks here of how people mix audio. If the speakers are moving in phase, it's the amplitude between the speakers that allows me to localize. Is the bird here? Is it here? Is it here? Is it right here? By changing the amplitude if it's in phase. A bird chirping high frequency is easy to localize. As I start slipping out of phase, your brain has trouble localizing on high frequencies. So the bird is over here, the bird is in the middle, or the birdie is over there on the right. Artistically, this is how they start doing some cool stuff. If I want to give the impression the bird is somewhere in front of you, I go 180 degrees out of phase. Your brain can't tell, is it here, there? It's coming from the front of the room. So with that said, what this tool allows you to do is to see phase, these hash marks off to the side here. The broader this line is here, the more out of phase it is between speaker pairs. So with that said, if you're trying to get an artistic audio mix of a helicopter flying behind you over your head and landing in front of you, you keep everything tightly in phase. Your brain can localize, it's coming, it's over me, it's landing. If you want to have you're being chased by the angry mob behind you, you go out of phase with the left and the right surround speakers. Your brain just feels the sound is coming from behind you. If you're in the middle of the battlefield, the middle of the mayhem and the chaos, you start going out of phase as much as you can in your surround sound because sound is coming from everywhere. I'm in the middle of all this action. So anyway, some cool tricks about audio mixing. Playing with phase. But what you don't want to do is on your down mix, your LTRT, where you got to watch, this can't, what you want to see is this diamond display. Here's the most critical one. LTRT is your down mix, and not everybody has surround sound. If this is over to the right, that means the speakers are in phase. Okay, fine. What you do not want to see is this to the left and red. That means it's out of phase and staying out of phase. If you have two speakers that are out of phase constantly, mathematically they zero out and you possibly hear nothing or muffled sound. Have you ever been involved in distribution of television? You're not sending me any audio. Yes, I am. Well, I'm sending you two channels that the XLR is connected backwards and it's canceling out.
Then there's mono.
Then there's mono, yeah. Then it's mono. Or cancel out, yeah, whichever. Okay, loudness. There's a short and an infinite. While you're creating sound. Short, at the moment in North America, is a 10-second moving window. Oop, didn't want to do that. Got to get rid of that animation sometime. Short is a 10-second moving window because the people figured out this stuff. The brain has a real-time sensitivity of volume changing in 10 seconds. If I ask you how loud was something 10 minutes ago, I don't know, it was either annoying or it wasn't, but I guess it was okay. If sound is changing over 10 seconds, our brain says the sound is changing. So this is a 10-second average moving window based on LKFS to see where you are. That should be neg 24. Infinite since the last time I hit the reset button. That could be for a 30-second ad, 22-minute program, a 50-minute program. I hit reset, hit play. It gives me the number of an average of LKFS over that range. True peak, when you're mixing, you're supposed to stay, 0 is maximum, you're supposed to stay down neg 2 dB from the peak. So your peaks are never going above -2 is the goal. Dialogue normalization, we talked about that. Loudness range is how much is my loudness changing. What is the range? Skip that. Thank you. Okay. Content readiness for file-based QC. Then that'll probably be enough PowerPoints for one day. Everybody doing okay? You need to get up and move around, but if you do, feel free, but I need to keep moving, get everybody out of here. Content readiness for file-based video workflows. As I said back in the good old days, this was it. If I made a copy of it, I had 2 of these I could walk around with. Today's world, it's no longer tangible. We're dealing in a world of abstractions. I have 1 hour of content. Maybe you're one of these people. I have customers that are doing 50, 60, 70 different file formats for every hour or piece of content they have. How do you QC that? Well, visual inspection. Content is king. Well, managing the assets is really the queen. Controlling the kingdom. So what you're doing with visual inspection is the good old-fashioned way. You hit the play button, you kick back, stay awake, and you watch and listen to the program. Back in the days of corporate news networks, I was involved with IBM's iteration of that, so we had content moving all over the place. What I learned, as far as QC, if I had no interest in the content at all, I was pretty good at QC. If it was government, financial, business practices for next quarter, I could catch all the problems. If it was a news clip of superconductivity experiments from the Zurich lab in Switzerland, I just, wow, this is cool. And I wouldn't catch any of the problems unless they were dramatic. I mean, my brain didn't want to focus on that stuff. I wanted to watch geeky stuff. So people are good at certain things, and machines are good at certain things. We still need people. We still need people to do the audio mixing for the loudness stuff we talked about. We still need QC people. Automating QC better utilizes your QC people. I was at a facility and once I was going through this spiel on auto QC and somebody said, this is going to be a big savings. We can get rid of all our QC people. No, I don't think I said that. You can better utilize your QC people. You better utilize your QC people. When 1 hour of content, a human being pushes the play button, looks and listens. 1 hour later, they pop it out. They do their paperwork, it's ready to play, or it's not ready to go to air. In the file-based world, do you want your QC people watching 80 hours of content that has nothing wrong with it? It makes no sense. Let's say if you have 1 hour out of 80, do you want your people watching 79 hours of content without finding any problems? You can't afford to do that. 100% QC is pretty much a thing of the past. There's usually, this content is gold. We have to watch everything with a human being. This content over here, we'll spot check it. Front, the middle, the end, whatever. This content here, if somebody complains, we'll worry about it. That lasts until somebody complains and a lawyer gets involved. This is not acceptable. You're sending us garbage. Well, then you need to do 100% QC. And once again, you're looking at good content. What you want to do is automate the process that people are only looking at stuff that needs to have a human being make a decision. Is it going to air tomorrow morning and I found a problem now? I don't have time to do a re-encode. It's not that bad. I'll let it fly, but we'll make a notice that we'll no longer accept these parameters because the picture's too blocky. If I have 2 weeks before it goes to air, a human being can say, well, it needs to go back. Sorry, try again. What people are good at is looking at signal levels, luma, chroma, audio levels, black sequences, frozen frames, blockiness, quality of experience, what people catch. Loss of audio and video, lip sync. A human being does a pretty good job of that. It's subjective and variable. Different QC people catch different things. Even if you're paying 100% attention, you can't pay 100% attention. I work with certain agencies that have people watching video. No one watches video from a screen for more than 20 minutes. How critical is that video? Are they off for 20, on for 20? Are they on for 20, off for 60? Because you need fresh eyes and a fresh brain to sit there and really glue your brain. After 20 minutes, most people have had enough. So in a QC environment, you want people looking at what needs to be made as an intelligent decision. It's good relatively small amounts of content. Cycle time is the length of the content. This is an hour tape. It's going to take me an hour plus to get it done. Where does human QC fall apart? Syntax errors. We're away from the tape-based world. We're into 80 different file formats. Interoperability. A human being pushes the play button to open a file. It plays. It has no bearing if it'll play when it goes somewhere else. For interoperability, you can have fatal syntax errors, but the decoder sitting right here in the QC room accepted it, played it, and it looks perfectly fine. It goes to the customer and has fatal syntax, structural issues. It doesn't play. The customer says, you know, what's this? Unacceptable. Interoperability. Once again, you have fatal or you have significant issues in how the encoding algorithm is configured. It might not play when it goes to the customer. It played here. It doesn't play when it goes somewhere else. Format mismatches, deliverables. The customer wants H.264. The QC person hits the play button. It's an MPEG-2 file, and it plays wonderfully. The customer gets it and says, no, not what I wanted. Header's not matching the content. All I know is it plays. Will some device downstream look at the header and not know what to do with the content? That happens. All the deliverable requirements. You have a customer that says video must be on PID 51, audio is on PID 70. If it's not that, I won't accept it. A human being, QC person, hits the play button. They're not doing transport stream analysis. But you need something that does. Far too much content to handle. Just people just get to the point. The human brain turns off. If you have to sit and watch hours and hours of the same content over and over again, eventually you can't take it. Cruel and unusual punishment. So you need to automate the process 24/7 because your skilled operators need to be doing things that require skill, not just looking at content because it's there. You need visual inspection. So if I find something, you know, I need to do something about it. If you catch errors in the file, syntax errors, something needs to happen. If there are fatal flaws within a file structure, I don't need to get our QC people involved at all. They don't need to even know about it. I need to send it. If I have fatal flaws in a file structure, it needs to go to someone who goes back to the person that did the ingest saying, this is wrong. Your QC people are out of the loop. They don't need to know that. Don't waste their time. Container formats. As I mentioned before, it was nice when MXF, Material Exchange Format, was being talked about several years ago. I said, this is great. One format that you use anywhere by anyone, anytime. It's like a Ziploc baggie. You open it up, throw your content in it, and give it to somebody else. They open it up, and you use the content. Well, the Ziploc bags are proprietary. Even though they're following the standard, so much for that soapbox. What is a wrapper? It's like a transport stream. It's some kind of a electronic thing that takes content, puts it inside it, so you can move it somewhere else. Because your essence, yes? It's a bucket. Thank you. I like that. It's a bucket. That's exactly what it is. I move it around. I put my video and audio essence in this bucket and I move it from point A to point B. So it's good for like acquisition, playback, non-linear editing, which is where we're taking content. And if the content is any good, it will be repurposed who knows how many times. Different languages, different edits, you name it. But it needs to be in a wrapper. Program stream, transport stream, MP4, MXF, one of my favorites, my big disappointment, but I've shared that story. Different containers for different workflows. That makes sense. MPEG-2 transport stream, suitable for playout, going to the outside world. QuickTime and MXF for editing and transcoding, which is where you're doing a lot of your workflow to begin with. Mezzanine files. This is a working copy of the original source. It's at a lower bit rate. You might have a 1.5 gigabit per second. You encode it down to 200 megabits, 100 megabits. High quality. As far as the human eye is concerned, it's lossless. But 200 megabits is not a distribution bit rate. It's too big. You're not going to deliver somebody to their home 200 megabits per second. So you mezzanine, do a mezzanine layer. It's for your workflow, your editing. It's iframe only, so it's easier for non-linear editing. iframe only is not very efficient. I don't want to do iframe only to the home, but iframe only for a mezzanine is perfect because I can do frame accurate edits. If you have a long GOP structure, an iframe is a real picture. I can pull it out, I can look at it. You take a picture with your cell phone, it's an iframe. It's a standalone picture. The longer the gap between your B's and your P's that we talked about, the more efficient my encoding algorithm, but I can't edit within, if I have an iframe every 2 seconds, I can edit within 2 seconds. That's not editing. I mean, I did editing in the past. Frame accurate was the only thing that would be acceptable. So with that said, it's 422 10-bit color sampling, which is not what you're delivering to the home. Because once again, mezzanine is not for delivery to the home. Okay, descriptive metadata. As I shared before, get that out of here. Oops. Oh, what's going on here? What is going on here? What did I do now? Oh, get out of that. Reboot. Well.
Put a head in front of it. It's okay.
Yeah, what happened here? How do I get out of here? Now what's happening? Why is my firewall kicking in? Well, we're having a Windows moment.
Yeah, you should open the Action Center, and then after that, you'll go to the file point.
Okay.
There's a flag in the bottom right, and click on that in the bar.
Down here?
Yeah, between
There's an X on the flag.
I think we're.
No, I'll tell you exactly. Go back to that screen and just click turn off the warning. Go back. Yeah. Just click on it, and then you can turn off that warning. Or go to the turn on Windows Firewall importance. To bring up the other screen. The other screen you had before.
Yeah, I'm trying to find it. I appreciate your.
Ignore that.
Okay, this one here.
Yeah, so turn off messages about network firewall. A bit below, to your left.
Okay.
Yeah, just turn that off.
Okay, close this out.
Supposed to solve it.
Let's just see if I can get around this.
Control alternate delete.
Well, I don't know what I did to do that, but I apologize.
Well, Microsoft has determined that you hadn't used
Oh, we have.
I don't know, man.
I defer.
There's a window. You close something.
I was hoping I have an idea, but
Okay, well.
sorry.
You got a pop-up
This other
window
one there, this
behind
other
the
message.
PowerPoint. Maybe you should
All right. Is there an engineer in the house? I'm just going to go through this. Maybe it'll go away.
So you'll see a pop-up window.
Okay.
Escape. You see this one?
Yes.
Yeah, maybe you should try to close this one.
Close.
Okay, so you're not. Yeah, close it. And doesn't matter. Maybe no.
That's could be. I got a lot open.
So no current issues detect. Click on that. So open that one. I don't know.
Well,
This now.
we're almost near the end, folks. I got 10 more slides to go. We'll just deal with it.
Can you drag it to another screen?
I can't move it. Well, it's always something, as they say. Pretend it's not there. Let's pretend this room isn't too hot and too crowded, too, while we're at it. All right. Appreciate your resilience. We'll pretend it's not there. File, where are we? Quality issues of VOD workflows. Is this where we want to be? No, jumped ahead here. Descriptive metadata, that sounds familiar. I work with the Library of Congress, and their job is to preserve assets, and they're big in the metadata. I'm sure people you're involved with that are doing archiving. Problem in the digital world, with a tape, I know where it is in the library. I can look at a label and say, oh, there it is. There's a copy. That's a master. That's whatever it is. In the digital domain, if you cannot search on it and find it, you might as well delete it and not worry about it for the next 1,000 years. It's of no value. So the challenge is, if you're doing archiving, your metadata has to mean something. I work with professional sports leagues, which their content is very valuable. If they bring something, anything out of archive, anytime somebody touches content, it's their job to update the metadata. Because you look at content that hasn't been important for 10 years, and all of a sudden you see stuff that's important now that it wasn't 10 years ago. Oh, there's somebody in the stands that's a celebrity now that back then was just somebody in the stands. This player was small time back then, now they're big time. This was their first game, or whatever. Every time somebody touches content, the metadata is updated with the new eyes looking at it today. So hopefully that means something in the future. Because you have content, if it can't be found, it's of no value to anyone. Of course, there's title rights, broadcast, description of all that stuff. But really, you need to have someone who can think broad enough to say, what is the value of what this content is, and keep it current. So that would be something to consider. Types of errors that you can look at with automatic QC, blockiness, misconfigured syntax errors, file copy transfer errors, all the stuff we talked about, things that the human being may or may not be able to find. What's nice about automatic QC, if it's a green light, it tells somebody it's ready to play. If it's a red light, it tells somebody it's not ready to play. And that human being is probably a QC person that needs to go in. They get on the GUI that they look at the file after they have the warning. If something is red for that file, just keep clicking on it, and it brings you down to the actual frame where your pass-fail threshold failed. So you know exactly what frame it is in the file. It could be short production or long production. It says you have a blockiness event 15 minutes into the production, just click, 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 it takes you right to the frame. And you say, well, we can live with it this time, or no, it's totally unacceptable. Then you do something about it, or it's ready to play, but you'll make a note for future. Syntax errors, overcompression, incorrect slice order. Well, that's ugly. Slice orders are like you take a 16 by 16 row of video and you shift it 8 or 16 pixels left or right. Usually it's only a frame or two. The human eye can miss that really easily. Unless you're looking right there. I mean, if you catch it, wow, that's awful. But just for some reason, slice errors, from my experience, get missed. So automating that part is a good idea. So you have a slice error, you can go in and say, wow, look at that. All those pixels are shifted one way or the other, but it's only for 2 frames. Do we let it go? Do we need somebody to go fix it? Structural checks. As I said before, incorrect number of streams in a transport. Your audio and video is on the wrong PID according to what the customer requires. Mismatch between play duration for audio and video tracks. That's usually something wrong if you have that going on. Mismatch between the actual bit rate, what the customer is requiring, compared to what's actually being signaled. Your GOP structure, frame rates, it depends. I'm working with Netflix and other content people, and they have content coming in from all their suppliers, and they have requirements. As far as file-based testing, if you want to deliver it to Netflix, here is what you must test to, and you must show me proof that it did pass that. So when it comes in my door, I can put it in my system and play it. Because once again, quality of experience. Netflix business case would get pretty messy if their content didn't play, or it was blocky, or it had freeze frames. So they push that responsibility out to the suppliers to say, meet my requirements or don't bother sending it, but prove it to me when you do send it that it didn't run through this test and all my pass-fail criteria that I require has been met. Readiness for workflows. In a cable infrastructure, we have a VOD, we have a head end, you have your hub where you're putting content in, taking it out, VOD servers, and your end users are up there, hopefully getting all this stuff. VOD workflow, you have a pitched and a catcher. The pitch is where it's coming from, the catcher is where it ends up, and it could be distributed all over a province, part of a continent, a global distribution to say everybody gets this content, or only in certain areas this content is specific, and over here they get something different. So you can actually target specific audiences, whatever you're trying to get to as far as your VOD content. VOD workflows, it's the same thing. It's MPEG. You can have corrupted files. You can have flag mismatches. All these things, cable labs compliance, assigned PIDs, things that people really don't need to get involved with. If there's an error, flag it. If it's a QC error, QC person looks at it. If it's a fatal structure, it's not meeting the assigned PIDs, the QC person doesn't need to say, okay, I'll look at it, but it doesn't make any difference. Somebody else. So what you need is a sorting structure to say, if this person gets notified. If that, this person gets notified. If this is ready to play and somebody else gets notified. Local ad insertion, once again, you have your splicing. That's where the action happens, and hopefully it's happening correctly. If it does, it goes out to the edge to the subscribers, and they have the content. The workflow, good old days, you have tapes. Now we're dealing with files. The problem is local insertion quite often means local production. Does that meet the standards of the network? Don't know. But it's your brand that could be impacted by someone's less than quality that you don't want to deal with. So you reject it back to the provider. So you can automate this process like Netflix is doing. It simplifies it. You don't have to deal with a lot of customer complaints because it's your content is your brand. Once again, gamut, errors, audio levels, all the stuff we talked about. The black blocking is freeze frames. Is it the right container, the right format, everything the correct bit rate, letterbox, pillar box, AFD, all that stuff needs to be in there if the customer requires it and it's part of the quality of experience. Adaptive bitrate streaming architecture. It's all about the manifest file. Didn't talk about that earlier, but a manifest file is what's going back and forth throughout the network. So what's in the stream, what bit rates are available. If I have more bit rate available, can I get something at a higher bit rate which has higher quality? If I have constraints on my network, can I request something at a lower bit rate? Does it exist? It doesn't know what's there, it has to be told. So manifest is what's available for your adaptive bitrate stream device to connect to, disconnect from, and get higher and lower bit rates. Once again, we're segment and fragment. We're kind of repeating ourselves here. that firewalls will pass HTTP traffic because it's not considered an attack. Anything new here is tedious to code refresh. We talked about that earlier. Unacceptable picture quality at lower bit rates. And that's where people get annoyed by the blockiness, the blotchiness. Might not be real macro blocks, but it's kind of a blotchy, blurry look the picture gets if it's over compressed. People don't like that. Small screen, you can get away with a lot. Big screen, probably not. We have a watch folder. That's really how this is oriented. So you must configure a watch folder for the pass-fail criteria for the content you're dropping into that watch folder, because only you know what that is. By doing that, the investment in time in automatic QC is you've got to determine what your pass-fail criteria is. Syntax checks, that's pretty much the given. If it's a improperly configured structurally file, I don't want to deal with it. How much blockiness, how much silence, how much black? Only you know that stuff. How many channels of audio should it have? What does the PID have to be on for audio and video? You need to tell that watch folder specific. If I drop content in there, that's the test it's going to run based on what I've determined. So the investment in automatic QC is building the watch folder checklist of what you consider pass-fail. Once it's automated, it's automated. It just kind of happens. If the file's ready to play, green is good, ready to go. If it's not good, quarantine it. Because what you don't want is content propagating through your facility that has problems. The whole idea of QC is to keep it from being delivered. If you don't have controls, the file could just keep moving through the workflow and it's not ready to play, which defeats the entire purpose of doing all this good stuff.
How long does it take to make a QC for a 1 hour time?
Good question. The answer is always it depends. This is a software-based solution. It would like a minimum of 2 cores to process a file, a maximum of 4 for efficiency. The more processing power you can throw at it. That's an important determination. In the world of QC, how many tests are you going to do? We have, I don't think I get into it here, we have 2 different decoders. There's an optimized and a reference decoder. If I'm dealing with content I don't trust, I've never seen before, or it's a lot of problems, I want to throw the reference decoder at it, which goes into the syntax, the structures, the ones and zeros, down as deep as it can go. If it's content I'm familiar with, use an optimized decoder. It's faster. So if I'm dealing with content I don't know, I don't trust, it takes longer because I'm going deeper. If it's content that I'm cracking through by the hundreds of hours per week, go to the less in-depth testing, which is a whole lot faster. A good rule of thumb, if it's typical bitrate MPEG-2 high definition, let's say at 12 megabits, it can be 5 times faster than real time. That's assuming you're using the optimized decoder and not throwing every test you add adds more time, because that's just what it does. Worst case scenario is high bitrate H.264 with every bell and whistle turned on. It can be 5 times greater than real time, because compression algorithm between MPEG-2 and H.264 is 10 times more complicated. Now we're going to H.265, which is 10 times more complicated again. So our development people aren't bored, put it that way. So kind of a vague answer, but that's depends on what content you have and what tests you run. QC reporting. I need something that is human readable and machine readable. If something is pass, something is fail, the MAM, the Media Asset Management System, needs to make determinations. Do I copy it? Do I quarantine it? Do I move it? What do I do with it? Who gets notified if it's pass or fail? That all needs to be machine readable. You need something human readable, something I can look on a screen and say, okay, here's what I need to do. I have excessive blockiness 15 minutes into this production. Other than that, it's great. Or it has a laundry, endless list of problems I've got to go through and make a determination. Human readable. So you need both, and they both need to be time correlated real time to where it needs to be in the system to make sure things aren't breaking down. Because you're moving hundreds of hours of content per day, you need something at a high level keeping track of all this stuff, or else it doesn't work. It stops. MAM system. Right before I quit IBM in 2000, my next job was going to be media asset management, the future of the world. Well, 13 years later, I would say they were right, but I chose not to stick around for that because Tektronix looked like more fun. So media asset management is controlling the whole kingdom. So there's different ways. You need automation of workflow. The problem, if anybody's been involved with automation, is all this different stuff doesn't speak the same language. So you need hooks with APIs into everybody's stuff, so a common IBM MAM system, whatever you want to use, is managing all this stuff. So it has to be able to speak. So there's a simple object access protocol and web services description language that are pretty much the common ones. So that way you have a common language for integrating software and seeing what's going on. Quality control. Well, in a MAM system, it's a back and forth. Create a job, is it successful? You can't see what's going on here, but it's a constant back and forth between the MAM system and all the devices out there to say, did it pass, did it fail? You know, if then what? So you're constantly branching through your facility. So with that said, I'm out of PowerPoints. I'm sorry to say.
Oh, well. I got a few here.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much.